good afternoon and good evening to everyone who is joining us from different parts of the world. I'm Nick Allardice. I'm the CEO of Change.org, and our mission is to empower people everywhere to make the change they want to see. And every month, millions of people around Change.org rely on Change.org to spotlight an issue, to mobilize support and win change. And in this Changemaker series, I'm really excited that we're going to be having a series of conversations with the movement leaders who are part of Change.org Plus, a new product from Change.org that equips changemakers with the infrastructure, support, and resources they need to really amplify and accelerate their impact. Now, one really important note before we get started, and before I introduce our very special guest, there's going to be space for questions at the end of this conversation. So please feel free to put them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll make sure that we get to as many of those as possible. Now, my guest today is Siddhu Pachipala. I'm so excited for you all to hear from him today. Siddhu was a high school senior who created a petition a couple of years ago to stop Texas representatives from removing minority history from the K-12 curriculum. And he has a new campaign that he's working on against book bans happening across Texas. Now, Siddhu has done all sorts of amazing things. We're going to hear more about this, but he's a finalist in the Regeneron Science Talent Search, a prestigious science and math competition for high school seniors. He's built machine learning tools that use patients' writing to assess their risk of suicide risk and what the best course of treatment is. He's written code to predict someone's suicide risk to then identify interventions, and done all sorts of other really interesting things that sit at the intersection of social impact, technology, data, and improving society. This fall, Siddhu is going to go to MIT to study political science. Welcome, Siddhu. Thank you so much for joining us today. I think your passion for activism and research in data and science is so impressive. It gives me so much hope and optimism, honestly, about some of the solutions that we can be coming up with to improve the world. And it's one of the many reasons that we're excited to have you as part of the Change.org Plus program. I would love it. Maybe we can start. Could you tell us, how did your activism start in the first place? What brought you to this world?
Well, thank you, Nick, and thank you to everyone here. I think it started for me as it started for a lot of other young people, thinking that, politics is something that's far-flung, right? It's something that happens every 4 years, far away in Washington, D.C., in the White House or Capitol Hill. But during COVID, I think we all started seeing that politics is something up close and personal. It's something that happens every day, right? That politics is, texting your local council person that your street lights out, or, ending that neighborhood ban on vendors, or, that dog barking late on the night. So it's making change, no matter how small the increment is, no matter how small the scale is. Politics is that instrument. So I think just seeing that, especially when our red room walls were our only company, is how it started for me.
Yeah, cool. So you launched a really amazing campaign a few years ago. Can you tell us all more about that? Like, what led you to launch it? What happened?
Yeah, so I kind of developed this habit of checking the bill tracker from the Texas legislature, because every day there would be some new crazy bill that would tick in, and then you would just be in awe of what new thing these legislators had cooked up. And then one day it was this bill called SB3, and it was of and relating to the social studies curriculum for K through 12 classrooms. And when you look at it, you see that it's a bunch of strike-throughs. And you see what's stricken through, and it's the history of white supremacy, slavery, the Ku Klux Klan, eugenics, indigenous populations, the Chicano movement, women's suffrage, labor movements, all these parts of history. They're so integral to understanding, the struggles of marginalized populations and people who still are facing struggles today. And, just the prospect of, an Asian student not learning about the Chinese Exclusion Act, or a Black student not hearing MLK's I Have a Dream speech as they should when growing up, is something that kind of demoralized me because even now, even with their existing system, we don't learn about those things enough. So I look on Twitter, I look in our activist circles to see what are we thinking about this, what's happening, and I see that there's not really that many people talking about the bill. I don't see like Twitter is not a buzz about it. So I think the first things people think about is to start a petition, right? I start a petition and to oppose the bill, to educate people about the bill. And when I go to sleep, it has, a couple hundred signatures, mostly family and friends and people I like DM'd on Instagram. And then when I wake up, it has hundreds of thousands of signatures. So that's how everything kind of started.
It's an amazing story, and I want to hear some more detail around some of how you did that. But a lot of people see things happening in the news, or things that they're concerned by or frustrated by, and most don't think to actually like do something about that, to kind of turn that fear or frustration or hope into a tangible thing that people can mobilize. What was it that really led you to do that, do you think? Why was it that was something that you felt compelled to do?
I think it's just like, if students like me don't do it, who will? Because it's the people who are affected by it, the people that see the implications every single day as they live their lives, that are the ones who unfortunately need to make the change, because politicians and parents aren't doing that. They're working against us. So the same way that like laborers need to fight for labor rights, or indigenous populations needed to fight for indigenous rights, students need to fight for students' rights, to learn what they have in our libraries, or hear our stories in the classroom. So I think it's just that piece of living the student experience and wanting it to be great for generations to come.
I mean, I wish more people thought that way, and I think the way that you do think that way, I think, is an inspiration for others. You got an extraordinary amount of support, like tens, thousands of signatures. Can you walk us through, like, how did you actually go about growing it?
Yeah, so it all started when I was just messaging in my family group chat and going Instagram person by person by person, please sign my petition. And that was, some way to get roots into, so that it start off, and that's kind of a seed for how it's going to grow. And then I think as people saw the text of the petition, saw that this was something that was happening in our legislature, something shocking, they started to send it to other people too. So it kind of was this, exponential effect, that as more people saw the petition, they'd post on their stories, or they would post it to their followers, so that it kind of spread that way. And then I think Change.org also promoted it, right? So they put it on their Instagram and email lists and published it on their website, and that kind of helped. So it was through multiple channels.
Yeah, cool. So any campaign is a process of like high highs and low lows. I would love to hear about a moment of triumph or joy in that whole process.
Yeah, I think anytime you hear someone's personal story, it's a high. So, Change.org has a really nifty comment feature where you can see what everyone's thinking about the petition, not just how they signed on to it, but their thoughts and feelings. And when I click through that, I see Texans just like myself, students and parents and teachers and administrators, all express how they're concerned about this tide of change that's happening in our schools, not the good kind of change. And they want to do something about it, and they felt voiceless. And this petition was a way for them to kind of regain some of that voice, and just hear how people like me had felt empowered by the things they learned in the classroom. And to see that taken away would be a disservice to them and their children. I think just hearing that firsthand was really motivating, and like helped push me to keep, pushing that petition, keep pushing it into real life events, or, a march or a protest, just these things to keep the momentum building.
Yeah, cool. And when you and I chatted last week, I know that there was, I don't know if it was unexpected, but these people kind of came out of the woodwork across TikTok, across Snapchat and Instagram to help really like amplify the message. Can you tell us more about, I guess, like how the word spread and what some of the nodes were that were driving that outside yourself?
Yeah, I think more and more we have to think about how there can be digital propagators of this information, right? So there'll be like TikTok micro influencers for specific regions. So in Texas, there's a set of, political activists who disseminate a lot of the information to young people like myself. So a lot of people get their information not from news sites anymore, but from TikTok. So we need to think about reaching out to those people so that if they make a post about this, then it can get out to more people than if we just reached out. So getting to those kind of hubs of information for different locales is really critical, especially in the age of TikTok. And then also, using Instagram effectively. So making, a nice batch of story posts or feed posts or example tweets and letters so that there's less of a jump between people and making that post, because having to create a whole post by yourself isn't easy. So making that the path of least resistance helps it to get out.
For people who are kind of trying to do something similar, raise awareness about something that maybe isn't getting the attention that it deserves, build momentum around a cause, what are some of the lessons that you take away from that experience of seeing how the word spreads with those like micro influencers and on Instagram? What are some lessons that you would share for people who are trying to do something similar?
Yeah, I think it's just because we live in such a digital space, activism almost has to become a game of marketing your issue, right? It's you found out about your issue, you want it to be changed, but you need it to present to people in a way that shows that this is urgent, that you can do something about it, and this is exactly what you can do. So it's using language that shows that urgency, that, communicates that this is going to affect you. Because if people don't feel affected by the issue, unfortunately, they might not sign on to it as strongly as they would have. So I think it's exactly in the way that you present your petition. I think Change.org does a great job of having people help with that, right? It's having these professional campaigners come on and help you with that wording so that it can make the biggest impact. And, it's doing the same thing with a social media post so that people feel it. They don't just read it.
Yeah, it's super important. So I ask you about a high from the campaign. It's sometimes hard as well. It requires like resilience and determination, and I'm sure that there were some hard moments as well. Can you tell us about a moment where you were uncertain or you had to overcome some barriers or that was challenging that campaign?
Yeah. I think the biggest or hardest thing was, not getting a response from the decision maker, right? The person who introduced SB3. And I think I learned something from that a bit, which is that you can't always expect to get a response from these big players up at the top, because even if hundreds of thousands of people sign behind you, especially here in Texas, they don't seem to be too responsive. So in my next petition, this one about book bans that I'm launching soon, I'm trying to focus on local decision makers, right? Local school boards and council people and individual schools, so that they are more inclined to be responsive to their fewer constituents. They are more accountable to the people because you can see them every single month in the Board of Trustees meeting. So bringing it back to that local scale, especially when those top decision makers aren't responding, is something that I've learned. And making sure that, we can have big issues on petitions. Like you can have a huge issue that we need to fix education here in Texas. But if you slice it into the little issues, right? Like, this specific book is being discussed to be banned at this specific school at this time, it's much easier for people to see that issue, and then easier for the decision makers to act on it. Instead of having this big philosophy to respond to, it's an individual decision. So breaking big issues into little ones and breaking big decision makers into little ones is something I've learned.
I think that's such an important lesson for people who are looking to make change in the world. It's so easy to latch onto these big abstract issues, but to really make change, I think one of the single best things you can do is break it down into those individual pieces, like super actionable, super winnable, very clear decision makers. How did you learn that? Like, what was it? Because like that's a really important insight. I think it's not obvious to everyone that that's the kind of way to think about taking a big issue and making progress on it. What led to that insight for you?
I think it's just looking at other Change.org petitions, right? You see hyper specific petitions that my school is proposing to extend school hours by 1 hour. Let's fight against this school doing this. Or it's focusing on individual people because if you're part of that school, you'll be so willing to sign on to that, seeing your own name represented, seeing how it will personally affect you. And it's easier to do that kind of marketing game whenever it is at that small scale. So even though you might not get the numbers that you would get with the bigger philosophical petition, you'll get the people that you need to sign behind it that'll make the effect that you want.
Yeah, it's a really, really important lesson. It's a really interesting thing that we see in the data of what works on Change.org actually is that campaigns that are targeted at the local level, like much more likely to succeed. Even the difference in you might think that the most effective headlines on Change.org are like short and snappy. But actually, when you start introducing like local elements, talking about specific schools or talking about specific places, it actually increases the number of support by a quite significant margin because people know that it's relevant. They know that it's something that is kind of really relevant to them. So I think it's a really, really valuable insight. It's one thing to launch a petition. It's one thing to get tens, hundreds of thousands of signatures. You did that, and you kind of pretty effectively built a movement of people who are supporting the outcome. You didn't get the response that you were hoping for up front from the decision makers. And I think it would have been really easy to kind of say, oh, well, we tried, And instead, what you're doing is you're breaking down this issue into a whole bunch of different pieces and you're kind of taking it forwards and you're using the momentum from that first campaign. And I think that's a really important way to think of the success of a campaign like this, that even though you don't get the first step, social change, I don't think is a linear process. It's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 3 steps forward, 2 steps back.
Right.
But what is it that you think inspired you to keep going? Because I think it would have been really easy to kind of pass the ball on to someone else, and many people do, but you're charging forwards. Like, what was it that led you to kind of be determined to take this forwards?
There's two slants that you can look at, the failure of a petition, right? You could say there's 180,000 people signed on to the petition and it still failed. There's something wrong with our political system. How can 180,000 people sign on to something and it not merit a response? But then there's also the fact that 180,000 people signed on to it. There's 180,000 people who are committed to addressing this issue and who took time out of their day to read the text of the petition and to click and write their name under it. So there's a coalition there that is wanting to change something fundamental about the education system here in Texas. And those people will move forward to whatever that those problems, whatever shape they take, whether it is the book bans, whether it is those changes in the Board of Trustees meetings, or whether it was just a couple of days ago, the government seizing the control of an entire democratically elected school board just a couple of days ago. So you'll see that change, or you'll see those people stay behind you. And I think that's the success of a petition, is getting all those people together, because you can't do it without that group.
Yeah. One of the sayings that I really like is social change is a team sport. It's not something that you should do alone. Can you tell us about the people that you've had around you? Like, how have you done this as a collective? Who's come out of the woodwork? Who have you worked with? What does that look like?
Yeah, so one of the best things I think that kept pushing me on in the beginning is just all my friends were saying, "Oh, I've never seen someone, address a legislative issue like my age, or people just like me can make a petition and have this many people sign on to it. Like, we have power." So I think it's just democratizing what the idea of an activist is. It was something so powerful for so many of my friends. And I think Change.org really helped with getting out to more people, right? With Change.org, we were able to get a press release out to USA Today and get that campaign featured. So a lot more people were able to find out about this bill, to find out about this specific attack as a part of this larger firestorm about critical race theory here in Texas. So people were able to take that action of signing the petition. After that big publication, we saw so many more signatures. So just the help of the larger team at Change.org and also the smaller group of friends really helped build momentum and keep me going.
I'm really glad that you touched on the role of media there. We see that as, again and again, we see that as a really important ingredient to campaigns. Can you talk more about what that meant to you personally and what that did for the campaign?
Yeah, so just seeing the fact that like a campaign that seemed like it wouldn't go anywhere, like a couple hundred signatures. I just wanted to maybe just get a couple more people to know about it, right? A few teachers here and there, a couple other students, because this would be something that would affect them. So I just wanted to get the word out a little bit. But then seeing that on the print version of USA Today was just awe-inspiring, I think, personally for me, that we have some power, enough power to see, our own voices shine, because the bill itself was trying to shut down minority voices, right? It was trying to take out those empowering stories, the stories that make us us. So to see our voices grow bigger than ever because of that bill was a great feeling.
Yeah, cool. So your activism and social change work is not limited just to petitions or campaigning. I know that you've done a whole lot of work in a whole lot of different ways. Can you tell us about some of the work that you did with your school's DECA group? Like, what did that look like? Yeah.
Yeah, so DECA is this business organization, and it's supposed to prepare leaders and entrepreneurs. And at my school, DECA is the big thing, right? You have some schools where football is the big thing or science fair is the big thing, but at my school, it's DECA. So I've been competing since my freshman year, and I focused on project management. So seeing through a project from initiation to planning and organizing to executing it to monitoring, controlling it, and closing it down, specifically in community awareness. So I love that you can focus on a concrete issue in your own community and and make a change and make a tangible change, and one that you can see and feel and hear. So most recently, it was the Web Warriors campaign, where we focused on students' lack of digital media literacy, be it through cyberbullying or cyber social awareness or cybersecurity, and educating them with seminars and Instagram posts and TikToks and Facebook Lives, and actually reaching out to decision makers for the first time, right? Legislators who could control the standards in our classrooms and maybe introduce things about digital media literacy. And I think the biggest things I learned from that I'll carry through my petition is, right, this idea of social chaining. When you send something to someone else, they'll keep sending it to other people, and it forms this chain. And it's those chains that build momentum. It's not sending it out to 1,000 people. You're not going to be able to do that. It's sending it to 10 people who send it to 10 more people. And you get that kind of exponential growth. And it's reaching out. I also learned that you can make some change for now by holding an individual event or a seminar, but you'll make lasting change when you reach out to the people who control what's going on. If you reach out to the politician who can write a bill to say, maybe we should teach students about what phishing attacks are, or maybe we should teach students about, what to do if they're getting cyberbullied, that will make the lasting change more than any individual action.
Yeah. I know you worked on a project called Web Warriors. Can you tell us more about that one?
Yeah, so that was the Web Warriors project. We had 3 segments to it. So there was the digital segment, where we created a TikTok page, Instagram, a website to reach out to the young people, right? That's where they would be. And we had all these sort of blog posts where people could learn and educate themselves on what are these malware attacks? How can I protect myself? What is multi-factor authentication? These different words that we'll hear. And then we had a seminar component. So we organized an assembly at our school, and we had this Instagram live stream where we brought all these people together to participate in activities, because it's really, people love to learn by doing. So we taught these people all about how to stay engaged in keeping yourself safe with the newest technologies. And then finally, we had that outreach component, which was reaching out to the politicians and reaching out to legislators, and specifically the Education Committee in the Senate and the House Committee on Education. We reached out to those key players, and we brought that up. And after we did that, we had some people say they would add it to their legislative agenda, and we went from dozens of attacks, of successful attacks in our district where students would click on phishing emails, to 0. So we were able to successfully educate people on that.
that sounds excellent. That's something that I could really use as well. I feel like there's a broader application there that is a really good one. You've got a long journey of social change and activism and life ahead of you. How are you thinking about what's next for you and long term? Like, how is it that you want to take these values forwards?
Yeah, so you mentioned at the beginning that I'm into research, and it's from a I think I'm young still, but from an even younger age that I've been interested in STEM, in using STEM as a method, right? It's approaching things with skepticism and using data to make decisions. So I would just love that idea. I think Change.org represents that, of combining that technology, that idea of using data with social issues, with the civics. And that's, I think, the best method to make change. It was last month I watched this movie called Dark Waters in school, and there's this lawyer named Rob Bilott, and he basically uses his knowledge of chemistry to poke holes in DuPont, who is contaminating this entire town's water with PFAS, these chemicals that cause birth defects and cancer. And he's able to bring justice to this entire community who wouldn't have known that they were being poisoned without him. So just using science can bring so much change to people. And I want to take that with me. At MIT, there's these great governance labs that use, behavioral science or computer science to optimize our government. And I want to take what I learned there and bring it back here to Texas, and combine that knowledge of data with law and policy to bring the most change to my community.
I love that vision, and it sounds like you're going about it in a really smart way. Watch out, Texas. I think that's really exciting. I don't want to be the only one asking questions here, so I want to give you a chance to ask me questions as well. Is there anything that you wanted to hear more about on the Change.org side?
Sure. I think I would love to hear, in your perspective, what are ways that change can help get a petition over the line to a victory, and then help petition starters just like me. And I'm also curious about what you think about native tools on the page. So, like, for example, we use a lot of third-party tools, right, to find your local school board or find your local representative. I wonder what you would think about having those native on the Change website.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there are two parts to that, and that I'll try and answer. The first is how to help get campaigns most over the line. And I think you spoke a little bit about, I guess, like the power of all the people who are signing the petition and the different comments that they're leaving. And I think something that I'm personally very excited for is how we can basically help access all of the skills, the talents, the passions, the resources that group of people can bring to bear on your issue beyond their signature or their share. And that, I think, is one of the most valuable things that I think we can do, because in that 180,000 people, there's like so many things that could be done. And I think that's through helping identify what are the best ways to draw on those resources. How do we make that really easy through updates and through gathering information about what resources exist on amongst that group. So that's one thing. Media is a big other one. We kind of, in the same way that you described about what that meant for you, that USA Today feature, that's a really inaccessible process for most people. And so particularly in Change Plus, I think it's something that we hear again and again, that making that process more accessible so that it's not just one media hit, but like you can repeatedly get that is a second. The third is drawing on the expertise of other people who've gone on to win campaigns like this repeatedly, and kind of bringing together the movement leaders and the creators who have the experience to do the lobbying, to do the escalation strategies. That's some of the different things that we're thinking about there. Around third-party tools in particular, look, I think it's really interesting. Like there's kind of two pieces to this. One is there is a whole bunch of stuff out there that does a really great job of identifying decision makers, but a lot of people don't know that it exists. And so the first step from my perspective is how do we start compiling those kind of knowledge databases essentially. And once we have some of those, it might make sense to integrate, and some of it might just make sense to point people towards them. Because I don't think we should try and do everything under the sun. Instead, it's more about going, what are the things that we can uniquely do? And for the things that already have good solutions out there, how do we push people towards them and help them access them if they don't know about them? Okay, so in a moment, we're going to go to some of the questions from the folks who are with us. So I just want to give another plug to keep asking those questions. I've seen a good few already come in. Before I do though, is there anything else that you would share with the audience about your journey, about what we've talked about, or about just, knowing who you've got on the audience here? Is there anything else that you would share?
Yes. Probably just a big thank you, right? Because Change.org right now, I think, is basically the word petition. When you hear the word petition, you think Change.org. Like, whenever someone has a problem, like if they wanted to change the lunch menu at school, anything that small, or the biggest thing in the country, wanting to introduce a whole bill, they'll go to Change.org. So Change.org has been one of the most powerful tools, I think, of bringing back what democracy is. Because I think for a long time, people have felt like they had to leave politics up to the politicians, to the people they see as, fit for the political class. But what Change.org is doing is making that accessible to anyone with an internet connection, right? All you have to do is click on the website, type in the text of a petition, and send it out. And now you are making change. That's all you have to do to make change. So I think, thank you for bringing that to fruition, because it means a lot for the people who wouldn't have had that tool otherwise.
I really appreciate you saying that. And I know for a lot of folks on the call who do the work day to day to make sure the site is live, to try and make it as easy and accessible as possible, and also to help folks like yourself, advise on campaign strategy. I know it means a lot to hear that kind of thing. I'm going to go to some of the questions that we've started seeing come through. And I'm going to start with one from Alice, who asks, what tech tools did you feel were lacking on the platform to maximize the impact of your campaign?
Sure. So I think I kind of mentioned a little bit one of the things. I think it's hard the first time you make a petition, what to have these people do after they sign, right? So they've clicked it, that's great, but is there going to be any additional step they're going to take? And I think having the guidance from these professional campaigners on the Change.org website really helps. So they kind of advised me, oh, you should maybe make a box for different social media post templates, or you should have an action center kind of thing where you draft letters that you're going to write to the education committee or in the Senate, and people can copy and paste that and send it out. So just having those ideas listed out would be really great, I think, as a great addition to Change.org. Like, oh, here are the steps you can take to make this petition even more actionable. Maybe include these different steps. So having that kind of listed out would be a great tool.
That's great. And you touched on a little bit about the kind of some of the advice that you got along the way. I think, can you share like what was the kind of impact and value of some of that kind of advisory support that you were getting? And tell us more about that.
I think campaigning is something so new for a lot of people. So I think the first instinct is you're just going to want to send this out to people and like have it grow very, very organically, right? But a lot of times you're going to need some sort of, you're going to have to actively do something to make this campaign make a real difference. So you're going to have to ask people to tweet that out, or you're going to have to make updates to this campaign. You can't be scared. Oh, I don't want to bother all these people with another update, but sometimes you need to do those things to make sure that it's going to carry through. That momentum is going to keep going through, and you're going to update these people. Oh, this bill has been brought to the floor. It's being voted on. You need to keep doing that. And I think those steps aren't so intuitive the first time, but having that guidance really helps.
Yeah, great. And shout out to the folks who helped do that for your campaign. I know the number of people who are on the call today were integral to helping along the way. So I want to do a big shout out for those folks. All right, next question. I'm going to go to Eric's here. It says media outreach is a top challenge for other Change Plus members as well. What actions did you have to take on your own to get to USA Today? What frustrated you, and I guess why doesn't Change.org have a tool for this? That's a good question, Eric. Maybe that's a question that you can answer, but maybe Siddhu, you can tell us more about like what actions you took and what was hard and how that could be easier.
Yeah. So my professional campaigner was Ben Vosis, and he basically told me about this process, right? So they draft up a press release and they'll send it to a bunch of media organizations. They'll talk about what's the petition addressing. This is, and I like a lot of these journalists wouldn't have known about that bill if it wasn't for the fact that so many people had signed on to it. So kind of presenting that information to them in a press release really helps. And then, and I personally would have known to do that, to reach out to media. I wouldn't have thought that that's something that's possible, or that's something that, these media people even cared about. So having that was really nice. And then after he sent that out, I think the editor reached out and said, "Oh, we'd love to do this story." So there's that interview process, so where we got to talk about, this is the issue, this is why we care about it, and this is what we can do. And it was Erin Richards at USA Today, and she kind of brought it into this larger narrative of how there is a war on education in Texas. So just seeing that process was, from beginning to end, was interesting. And I think it would be nice to see that as from the get-go, to know that that was an option, that there are steps we can take. You can, write an op-ed or a letter to the editor to your local newspaper, or you can do a larger press release like this. And I think it was helpful to have the person with me, but I agree. I think it would be great to see that on the website.
Yeah. What was it like kind of preparing for that interview? Like, it can be intimidating. Like, what did you learn about what it takes to engage with a journalist like that? What advice would you give for anyone else who was in a similar situation?
Yes, I think journalists are great at their job because they're professionals at trying to make you feel comfortable enough to tell your story. So you don't need to be scared, because all these people want to do is amplify your voice, right? They're on your side. So it was really comfortable in that conversation, right? She just wants to know, why did you start this? What drove you? What are the specific moments that have been the highs or the lows? It's exactly like talking to you right now. So it's just like telling your story, and she will, phrase it in that beautiful language, but it's just the rawest form of you it can be, and it should be easy.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. We've got a great question and suggestion from Barbara, who, as a librarian, is encouraging you to reach out to other school librarians in your community. Is that a network that you've been able to access? Have you thought about that at all? Do you see any opportunities there in particular?
Yeah, so I'd love to talk to my librarians. I don't know if I could like list out their names and then also like interview them and get their content out, because they probably don't want to lose their jobs. But there are some things I see in school libraries, right? In my own library, the history section is totally blocked off. You can't enter without a librarian accompanying you, because so many parents had complained to the legal department about, critical race theory in our history books. So we can't even access that. So I would love to talk to librarians on their perspective, because they're the ones who are at the interface of all this. They're caught in this battle between, our most sacred spaces for knowledge and then parents and politicians. So I would love to talk to them. So thank you, Barbara, for that. I'm going to check out that website.
I love that suggestion. Getting some good campaign tactics and coalition building ideas, even on a call like this. So thank you for sharing that, Barbara. Ben, we heard about Ben earlier, and Ben, I'm going to go to your question next. Ben says, you mentioned earlier how reaching out to TikTok influencers to post things may be one of the most effective ways we can get information in front of young people. Are there any other ways you think we can meet young people where they're at and help them realize their power and start trying to make change the way you have?
I think one of the funniest things for young people like me is or I guess older generations try to relate to us. So they'll try to throw in some slang or, try to hop on trends, and they try to like, oh, this will be really appealing to the young people. If it does go viral with us, it's because we're kind of laughing at it. So I think having young people at the table, right? Like, so they can discuss, oh, I think we should try this or this. Maybe even having young people be these hubs for Change.org, right? Like showing people the ideas in these petitions, showing people that these are events that are happening, in our own way, because I think we know how to communicate to people like us. So I think it's just having young people on your side.
I think that's totally right. And thank you, Amy, for we're all thinking of that meme. How do you do, fellow kids? Going to relate to the youth. All right. I'm going to go to Jess next. As someone who recently applied to college, are there any skills from your activism that you acquired that you think are going to be helpful as an incoming freshman?
Wow. Okay. I think it's always helpful to be able to communicate your ideas. And I think activism has all been about communicating, right? Building a whole coalition of like minded people requires you to be able to communicate exactly what the issue is, exactly why you care about it, and exactly what impact we can have if we all work together. So, even talking to you guys now, this is something that I didn't think I would be able to do maybe even a couple years ago. So just being here is a great example of what I think it'll bring to me as an incoming freshman. Because even on a college campus, I want to keep fighting for these kinds of changes. Even if I'm in Massachusetts, I want to keep talking Texas issues. So definitely just that being ability to talk about the issue.
That's great. Thank you. And then I think we've covered a lot of this question, Sarah, but I am going to go to this as the last one. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you think is like really helpful to share about how you've been able to find supporters for your campaign and the way that you've spread awareness? Because so many people on Change.org are kind of working on that. And if there's anything we haven't touched on, I think that's great to share as well.
The biggest piece I think that we haven't touched on is the fact that not everyone is going to be a supporter, right? So you're going to reach out to people who might not want to sign on to it. And some of them will be quiet about it, but some of them will be loud and angry and mean about it. They'll call you names, or they'll say this petition's stupid, or even worse things. So I think just acknowledging that not everyone's going to sign on to it, and it's okay. It's not your fault. It's not saying that your campaign is any less worthy. They just happen to disagree. But I think acknowledging that, and also having a community of people who can help you get through. I think that's what Change Plus is trying to do, is bringing all these people together, because there is no activist community formally other than Twitter. Twitter's the next best thing. But I think just having people who understand that struggle and people who know what it's like to go through that is a big piece.
I love that lesson, and I would actually just love to hear a moment more. Like when you were experiencing that, what was helpful for you personally? Tell us about how you got through that, because it is something that we hear from a number of folks, that resilience and having the confidence to push through and know that not everyone is going to agree, and to get through some of that resistance. Like, how did you do that personally? What made the biggest difference for you?
The love flowing in from the people that I do know, I think outweighs the hate from people I don't know. So like, even if I DM this random person on Snapchat and they say, "Get away, you liberal," then it doesn't matter what they say if there's so many people lending support and saying that this petition speaks for them, and that their feelings are so captured by the words in the petition. So just hearing that people feel with the petition, they don't just agree with its words, was so powerful. So I think even reading those comments of support under the petition, that was enough to outweigh all even the little bit of hate.
Yeah. Well, major kudos to you for kind of pushing through. And I think it's really exciting to hear that vision of bringing community together, of folks who are kind of leading change like this, putting themselves out there and navigating the highs and the lows, and being there for each other, is something that kind of resonates, and that you see as being a valuable part of what we're doing with Change Plus, because that's something we're really excited for as well. Great. I think we are at time, and it's been a real pleasure to chat to you today. Would you make any closing comments before we finish up?
Sure. I just want to say thank you again. It's great to see so many people on this call, some familiar names too. You guys do such amazing work, and like the change, even like I've been here for like 2 years or 3 years, and even then I've seen the Change.org platform evolve so much for the better. Like y'all there don't just stick with something, even though it worked perfectly, right? Your platform worked amazing, but y'all still work to keep improving. I get so many updates about the new features and the new guides and the new strategies, and it's amazing to see y'all keep working on that. So thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us today. I am inspired by the work that you're doing, and we're excited to be alongside you as you keep doing it. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We're going to finish up there, and we'll see you next time. See you later, folks.
Bye. Thank y'all.